I'm Bailey Parnell, and this is Let's Think This Through. Join me for drinks as I bring on guests for conversations that inspire, amuse, and challenge us, but in a fun and relaxing kind of way. Ultimately, it's to help us all learn and live a better, easier life. So let's think this through. Good morning, all of you beautiful thinkers out there. I just want to take a moment and express my gratitude to you all for taking the time to listen to Let's Think This Through, because just all of the time I am reminded just how important it is for us as humans trying to figure out this thing called life, for us to just take a moment, sit with other people, and think, like just hear each other's thoughts. Imagine how simple that statement sounds, but I know how hard it is for so many of us to do that, whether it's because we can't find the time or we just don't have the energy, or even if we do have the energy, the attention is being taken by kids or by social media or whatever. So I just want you to know that I do not take for granted that you've decided to spend some of your attention on me and this conversation today. So thank you. Now, on this episode of Let's Think This Through, I will be having drinks with someone who has been in our life for quite some time now. I think nearly 15 years or more at this point. And I've only ever described her as complete light. She's just one of those people where openness, like true positivity, and like always makes you feel like you're a part of the group, that in kind of inclusive nature, like those people, it actually just emanates from her being. I first met her when I was a student at university, and she was working at the Tri-Mentoring program. And I watched her blossom into this leader that she is today, and this is all alongside us getting rowdy in the Toronto scene. She is genuinely one of the smartest, most humble people you are ever going to get to know, and she specializes in equity, inclusion, and diversity work, and we even talk about why that is such a hot term these days. So today, on Let's Think This Through, I will be going for drinks with our friend, Akeisha Lari. Akeisha, thank you for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I know you very well, but you're going to have to introduce yourself to the people.
Okay. I mean, what are we talking about here? Like a little brief introduction or like my whole life story?
You know what? I was just saying on the last episode that all my friends they'll be like, oh, I'm just like a mom. And I'm like, as if, like, give us the Oscar introduction. Like,
Okay.
What are you doing?
Okay, well, here we go. So, born on the beautiful island of Trinidad and Tobago, I am an Indo-Caribbean woman. I am a partner to a lovely Persian man that I met on the first day of high school in grade 9. Insert the And I am a mama of 3 littles and two little girls and a little boy, ages 10, 6, and 4. So my life is a constant state of busyness. I am a lifelong learner, and I know that's like such a loaded term, but I really, truly love learning. I'm the person that when I'm out of school for more than a couple of years, I'm like, what else can I do? What else can I learn about? I'm bored. And then when I get bored, I like just get up to trouble and like take on way too many things.
Have another kid.
This is like the longest, Bailey, I've ever gone without being in school, and I'm already starting to itch. And I'm like, I just wanted Keon to start kindergarten, and now that he did in September, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. What am I doing?
Oh, geez, Dr. Lari's on the way.
Right? We'll talk about that later. But yeah, so that's me. What else? I live, eat, breathe equity, diversity, inclusion, respect, love, kindness, empathy, you name it. My kiddos joke around that, like, when people ask, oh, what does your mom do? They're like, oh, my mommy teaches people to be kind. And I like think that's the sweetest thing in the world, because at the end of the day, that's really what I've done for the past 18 years in my career. It's just about like, how do we help create wonderful, kind, empathetic people while they're in post-secondary? And so most of my like professional career has been in post-secondary. I've worked at Toronto Metropolitan University, which is where I met the fabulous Bailey and a lot of my really close friends. That's also where I went to school for my undergrad in social work. And then I also worked at Ontario Tech University. And now I am at Seneca in the Reconciliation and Inclusion Department. So really zeroed in on the equity work after about 16 years of student affairs and student life work
Mm-hmm.
with dabbles in equity and inclusion. And then I got
Mm-hmm.
to this point in my career where I was like, I want to center in on like more university, college, higher level of equity and inclusion in terms of like implementing it across entire institutions versus
Mm-hmm.
programming, which is what I've always done. But
Yeah.
yeah, now I'm looking at like strat plans and I'm on policy committees. I'm on this
Yeah.
president's working group and all this. And this is what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted for myself when I got to that, when I got to that level where I felt very confident in my equity journey, then I was ready to take it to the next level in my professional journey too.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
mean, even when I met you, you were in Tri Mentoring,
yes.
which for listeners, the Tri Mentoring program was what it sounds like, three levels of mentoring. Or do you want to explain it?
Yeah, it's it's an opportunity. Well, it started for mainly racialized students to feel to have a space at Toronto Metropolitan University. Back then it was
Mhm.
Ryerson, to have a space where they could connect to people that looked like them, that maybe had similar lived experiences as them. And it started as a real, like, it felt like a drop-in center at a university. Like, it was just so
Mm.
chill. We'd play euchre, we'd play games, there'd always be cultural food, and people would be talking about like what they were gonna eat when they got home, that their mom made roti, or their
No.
parent made like udon noodles, and there was no like, "Oh, I should keep my ethnic stuff to myself." It was very like, talk
Wow,
about
yeah.
whatever you want. And through that informal mentoring
Mhm.
was happening, where people were just connecting. It was set up as like, and it still is set up as a formal mentoring program, but I think the informal connections
Mm.
is what made TMP what it was. And students in first year got matched up with upper year students, and then upper year students got matched up with career mentors. And now it's expanded to where it has group mentoring, where you're kind of in groups with people with shared identities, and it's turned into this whole cool next level of like inclusion type programming, where you're just hanging with people from your similar background that you can connect with and build bonds with while at university. And that's where I think that's where you first met me, when I was there.
Yeah, that's where I first met you, and I was introduced to TMP. Well, I mean, I worked for the university eventually, but y'all did a lot of work for first generation students, and it was kind of the first introduction that I had to even the concept of a first generation student, which I am, because for listeners, a first generation student just means that your parents didn't go to higher education. And at the time, both my parents hadn't graduated high school. And so when I remember like meeting y'all and the stuff you're talking about that we go through, it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's what it's called.
Yeah,
Because you don't have someone at home you're kind of trying to figure out this new world as well as being a student. And so you all helped me through that experience.
big heart. Yeah, I think even for me, like, I found my way
Mm.
into this work that I do through that program, right? I found my mentors when I was a student in second year. I didn't get involved in first year, which is hilarious, because now I'm telling students from like pre-enrollment, get involved. I didn't do it and I have regrets from my first year. But starting in second year, I got involved, and I was involved with TMP, and that's where I met my guides and mentors and my people that I still keep in touch with to this day. Like,
Mhm.
I'm talking 20 plus years that I've known some of these people. That's how long ago I started university, it feels
But
like.
it's also just amazing that that program, like the way that we describe it, sounds like, oh, that must have just come up in the last few years because of people's awareness. But actually, like that mentoring program in particular was like what? How old is that? 20 years?
25 plus.
Like that
It was way
is
ahead of its time.
original, way ahead of its time, man.
Yeah, way ahead of its time. And it did so much for so many generations of students. Like, I looked at my LinkedIn, and I would probably say half of my LinkedIn are all
Mm,
TMP peeps. Like, whether we worked
yeah.
together, whether they were my student staff when I worked there, or whether they were a staff and I was a student. Like, it's just
Mm,
it's created a world where we just all connected on this, need
yeah.
for belonging and this need for community, and we found it there, and it's kept us all together, and it's really, really sweet to see that it's continued on years later.
Hmm. I also like that you described your work both there and afterwards as I just help people be kind people. And I think everyone can relate to that.
Yeah.
Even if you're not in this space, even if you're not in higher ed or you don't understand DEI, you're just like, oh, thank goodness someone is doing that.
Mhm. Well, I think it came from like, I too was a first generation student, immigrant mom, like,
Hmm.
Canada, late 1980s, whole lot of racism and sexism and you name it. And like, I just watched my mom and my family go through so much that I was like, why weren't people just nicer to them, right? Like, why
Oh,
did all these barriers exist? Why was there so many inequities that, she had to deal with, and my aunts and uncles? And, I just was
no.
like, what could I do as one little person to not have others go through that, or like to create spaces where new immigrants to Canada now don't have to go through as many challenges as maybe my mom did in the 80s in Canada as a single immigrant woman with a child. Like, wow, she did it, and now I get to create spaces for other students that are looking to expand their own life and follow their own dreams and have their own goals, to do it with hopefully less barriers. And some of those are finance, some of those are, building communities, some of those are just education wasn't attainable,
Mhm.
but through conversations with folks like me that said, no, you can do it. I did it. You can do it too. And I always say that with a little bit of like, it isn't meant to be like, because I did it, you can do it too. There are definitely different challenges that people face, but I sort of like share my story with the hope of inspiring that, like, I had everything stacked up against me, really and truly. And through connections with other people, through meeting my mentors, through meeting my people that had my back, I got to where I am, and now I get to be that person for other people. How cool is that, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
love it.
No small feat. Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you drinking over there?
Oh, yes, I have a delicious coffee. I'm not a sugar person because I'm sweet enough as it is. So just a coffee with a little bit of milk, and I put it in my New York cup. And I owe
Yeah.
it to Bailey over there, and also like tons of family in New York. So I would always grow up going there. It has a special place in my heart. I always said
Mm.
if I didn't, if I wasn't a Toronto girl, I would probably be a New York girl. So
I didn't realize, and I could see that, and I think you should give it a test, selfishly.
Maybe like my partner and I need to talk about it once in a while. It's either Toronto, Vancouver, or New York, and I think we're staying here a little bit longer, but who knows? Who
New
knows?
York.
Definitely visits. Like, we were just there 2 years ago, and I'm itching to go back. I want to challenge.
Oh gosh. Yeah, let's make that happen
Yes.
ASAP. I am also drinking coffee because I am like so tired this week. But I specifically chose my United Nations mug for you because I just thought, I was looking at my mugs, I'm like, oh, the idea of the attempt to work together to even the playing field access. I'm like, this is giving Akeisha.
I love it. I love it.
Okay. We really did get up to some things down in Toronto, though. So,
Yes.
as much as we talk about New York, I'm still, Toronto's still what I would consider home for sure. And I guess even if you go further back, Brampton.
Yes, you are. Yeah, you're Brampton, and I remember when you were like at TMU, you were definitely what I imagined like a Toronto person to be. Just like I would see you walking through campus, and you just had this like, yeah, Toronto vibe to you. So popping that into New York, how's that been for you? Like,
19-year-old Bailey would be so flattered. Coming from
oh
coming
yeah,
from Brampton, just outside Toronto, I always felt like I was the Toronto girly.
you're a city girl, and that's why I think New York like fits you so well.
Yeah. And did you feel the same when you were in Toronto? Because wait, where did you grow up again?
I grew up in Toronto. I would like
Yeah.
downtown
Yeah.
Dufferin, Bloor, Ossington
Okay.
area, and then moved out to Scarbs in
Mm-hmm.
like I think grade, I would say grade five-ish.
Yeah.
Is it grade five? Yeah, grade five-ish. And then, but had that Toronto heart that I like commuted from Scarborough to my Toronto school. I didn't want to leave my TDSB downtown Toronto school. So I would commute to elementary school like about an hour. And even high school, I stayed downtown. I went to
Mm-hmm.
Harvard Collegiate at Bathurst and Bloor, like where that old Honest Eds used to be.
Mm-hmm.
That was my spot. And I've always kind of been a city girl. Wherever I lived, I ended up in the city. Like, that's
Yeah.
where I felt most comfortable. Ended up going to TMU, working there for, 11 plus years, did my master's at Boise. So I was going between like a U of T girl, a TMU girl.
Battle
And
of
then
the
like, yeah,
schools.
just always downtown. And then finally, dream came true when I got into my master's. I said, if I get in and I'm going to U of T and working at TMU, I am going to live downtown. So I moved to the wonderful area of Young and College. Like, how much
Yeah, I
more
remember
central
that.
can you get? Good old Young and College. And yeah, so that's where I was for a good chunk of time. And then eventually, once space was needed for my ever-growing family,
Yeah.
we moved out to
For, for
Ajax.
those things that call me mother.
Yes, those little cute beings that need
Yeah.
more space than I could give in a, 1+ den
Yeah.
in downtown Toronto. So we moved out to Ajax. But like we're one of those families that like and I'm talking any chance we get to go back into the city, we're not
Uh-huh.
like, oh, it's a GO train ride, like an hour away. No, we're like, get on, let's go. Like
Yeah,
what's
let's go.
happening? Young and Dundas, constantly searching Harborfront, like what's happening, what events.
Uh,
And we just take this wonderful family there.
what are some of your fondest memories from our Toronto nights
Oh
out?
gosh, I was thinking about that as we. So first
I
of all,
have
another
some.
ode to you is that like I don't put on these hoops for anyone, but I went and found my big
Stop,
ones.
really?
Because I was like thinking about our like Crawford days and like our hip hop nights
Oh my
at
God.
oh my god, College Street Bar, hip hop Wednesdays, and like how we would go and party. And I really thought that like that group that we had at that time, I was thinking about it and I'm like, what a perfect like 9 to 5 and then 5 to what, like
Yeah.
2, 3 a.m. Like how wonderful it is that you can work with people and then like quickly go home, change clothes, slap on deodorant, redo makeup, and go back out again like an hour later and not worry about what time you're coming home. And then
Yeah.
and I saw this thing recently on social media that was just like, millennials are a different caliber of like party people because we would do that and still get to work on time, like 8:30,
Yeah.
walking in, looking good as ever, not knowing that we were just like partying hard on a Wednesday night and like so much fun. I think those are some of my fondest memories. And then the conversations, like it was this all the time. It was just like conversations about what's going on. And what I loved about our group is that it wasn't superficial conversations. Like, no, like,
Uh-huh.
how are you feeling? What are you dealing with?
Oh
What are
yeah,
you
so
going through?
true.
What do you need? Like, what do you need from me right now in this conversation? And like we got deep and that's where these bonds were created, that like, yeah, I could still call up any one of you and just be like, hey, something's going down, I need a friend to talk to, and they'd be like, I'm here, pause everything, let's chat. And that came
Wow.
from those nights of trust in each other and like
Yeah.
laughs beyond belief.
And
And
y'all even knew each other long before I came into the
yes.
picture, but I definitely associate Crawford's as well, which everyone listening, Crawford's is a hip hop club, hip hop and R&B
Yeah.
club in
Yeah, dancehall
Toronto.
reggae on the basement, that lower level
Yeah,
was
the
always like
basement.
the
Yeah.
basement that felt like a house party where you could like bang on the roof, like hilarious.
Yeah,
Loved
and
it.
I knew I came a little bit later into the group because Hamza, whom everyone here listening knows, I think, were you the tea time group?
Yes. Oh,
Oh,
yeah, tea time. How could I forget tea time?
so basically, everyone,
Go for it.
there was a group called Tea Time, and the T in Tea Time stood for tequila. We were not always this demure.
No. No.
Actually, we probably were. You just didn't know it.
It was such a funny thing. And like the whole premise of tea time was that no matter where you were in the bar or club, if you saw anyone from our group do this,
Oh
then
my
you'd hold it up
gosh.
high. If you saw this, it meant time to meet at the bar for a tea time, and we'd all just meet there. And like tea time became X time because people were like, I can't do tequila, I've had too much. So it'd be like
Everyone just got
whiskey or whatever
older,
you wanted.
basically.
Yeah,
They're like,
but
no more, no more tequila, but I will still meet you at the bar and
yes,
we can still hang out.
yes. And like we'd be in the most random places, or like, yeah, just so, I'll share this. Even at your wedding, we did it.
Yeah,
We went
yeah,
up,
yeah.
and then everyone was like, "Oh man, it's time for tea time." We all met at your wedding bar and like
Yeah,
had a
that
beverage.
was
It
so
was great.
fun.
It was. It was really
Oh,
fun.
yeah, and I also remember, do you remember the Soca festivals that they would do around O Week or
Yes.
September in Yonge and Dundas
At Young
Square?
and Dundas, yeah.
That was really fun. And then UFC nights, of course.
Oh, the UFC nights.
Probably wearing our Probably wearing, do you see those memes about how millennials dress business casual at the club? Those are amazing.
Well, it's because we didn't go home half the time. We just
Yeah, we're
continued.
like, gosh, we need to transfer over from work. What is this peasant stuff?
Yes.
We need
Yeah.
to go straight there. You
Yes.
need to get ready.
Come on. Just know better. Yeah, no, those were like such fun times. And
Mhm.
those USC nights were hilarious. Oh my gosh. I'm just
Yeah.
imagining I like see this, in sitcoms where they do that like, and the person's like seeing segments.
Yeah.
It's like a flashback moment for me, just being like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, and we did oh yeah, and we did that. Oh, another pint. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
The wings just arrived." Like, so good. So good.
It's like phases and stages, but now you are hardcore in the mama era of life.
You know what's funny? I am, but then every once in a while, there's just a throwback night. Like we went out for one of my friend's birthdays to a little bar here in Pickering, and it literally felt like an old school night. Like it was just
Mhm.
all ladies. There was what
Uh,
6 of us that went out, and we got home at 3:30, and I was like, I cannot do this. And then of course 7 o'clock the next morning, I get little hands. Can I have pancakes? And I was like, ask your dad.
yeah.
You cannot
I'm
have pancakes. You can go eat dry cereal that I don't have to pour milk for. No, no.
I'm pretending I'm 20 today, child.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, but I honestly love I think you were like one of the first in our friends group to have kids and to grow your family, and I have you in other groups in my life, and like the first sister or something like that. But you're one of the people I consider as like an inspiration for how you can do this. Like um, you don't need to be, you can be you. Like, because I guess before people like you had kids in my life, I hadn't really seen kids from like birth to present. And then it was my nieces and nephews. And then even still, I would say like the way that your friends raise kids is probably even closer to how you would
For
do it
sure.
than your siblings, because they have like totally different lives, live in different places, but your friends are like similar vibes.
Yep.
So, anyways, you're one of those people where I was like, "Oh, okay. That's fun. That looks fun."
I actually remember that when you held Ari, my firstborn Aria, you were like, oh, like, I don't know. She might be 'cause she would smile with you and like, it was such a, like, she was a very, very, like, warm child that loved people. Like she was just like mini me still to this day. And she was one of those kids that'd be like anyone that could put their arms out. She's like, yeah, I'll come to you.
Oh,
And she did that with you. And I remember this distinctly. She did that, and you were like, oh, like this isn't so bad. You were just kind of
huh,
like, ah,
I like this one.
this one's good. Because
My
I,
how times have changed. Now I think
yeah,
I just prefer the company of children.
yes, yeah, and
Well,
like
that might sound odd, but you know what I mean.
no, I totally know what you mean, and I think that like there is a fine art to balancing, but it isn't as scary because
Mm,
I mean I can speak for myself. I have this big village of support. I have
mhm,
like my mom is here around with us, and so is Nima's mom and her partner, and then I
mm,
have friends that are like we've kind of gone through these life changes at the same time. So I have like groups of friends, whether they are auntie auntie or uncle or whoever, like to my kids, or just a friend that we have, our neighbor friends that they just got to meet through school. There's so many people around me that are just kind of going through similar or like the same stuff that I could just
mhm,
count on them for whatever I need. Like I'm running late. Like one of my good friends,
mm,
Gazala, one of my friends.
mhm.
I remember like she lived really close to me, and there were times when I got stuck at a meeting or something, and I'm like, gee, I gotta get Aria by 6 p.m. or it's $1 a minute from daycare. She's like, I got you. And she would like roll out, go pick up Arya. The daycare got to know her. And like,
Aw,
it's stuff like that that made those early years of parenting with, a job where I was definitely evenings for events and so on. It made it so much easier to balance. And I guess maybe that's what made it look achievable. And I think,
mhm,
when you have that group of people with you along the way for support, it's such a special thing to have. And I'm
mhm. I
very
think
thankful in my early years as a mama because I was just figuring it out. Now I'm like an OG. Now I'm like with Keon, my last one, I'm like, I can balance everything. I could hold 50 things in my hand and still get him out of a car seat. Like, no problem. But with
that is
Aria, it was
that
so,
is the true skill, yeah.
right? Yeah. But with Aria, I was just like, okay, put everything down, unbuckle the baby, hold her 2 hands carefully. Like, so different. And
Yeah.
I think with experience and with support and with like a realization that you're going to make mistakes and that's okay is what
Mhm.
like led me to me feeling very comfortable in motherhood.
Yeah, I always see on your Instagram, I feel like you do a good job, or so it appears at least, of connecting your kids to their community
Mhm.
and connecting them to their history and their heritage. And well, I imagine you go about that with intention. Like, how do you go about connecting them with their heritage?
Very much with intention. Like,
Mm-hmm.
both Nima and I, our heritage, our cultures, Trini and Persian are two very big cultures. Like they come with a lot of stuff. They come with food and music and family and art and culture and dance and song and food and food and food.
Yeah.
But yeah, they come with so much that like we both really wanted to share that with them. And
Mm-mm.
when I think about when I thought about having kids, when we thought about having kids, we thought about, okay, what will it be like to raise multiracial kids? And
Uh,
what do we need to actively think about? And I think like the first and biggest thing I would say is that like so many people, as we solidified our relationship, were just like, oh my gosh, you're going to make such cute mixed babies. And to this
oh,
day,
I
I'm
hear
just like,
that. I
when
get
we
that.
hear that, I'm sure you do without even knowing if that's, anything that you're interested in, but that's a whole other story. But
True.
like people just assume that like one, you want to procreate, and two, that when you do, they're going to be these adorable mixed little babies.
Mhm.
And like I right away was like, not gonna do that, not gonna
That's
play
not
that
what.
game. I was like, my children will be who they are. And now seeing them and seeing them take on aspects of myself and Nima, personality wise, looks wise, everything, it inspires me to want to keep them connected to both
Mm,
heritage, like both sides of our heritage, because like I look at them and I could just see the Trininess in them and the Persianness in them, and I could see this need for them to connect to both. And the way that we sort of do it is like whenever we do something that's like we take them to Kitty's Carnival, right? Every year
mhm.
that's their thing. They go to
Yeah.
Kitty's Carnival. You can see Aria's stuff back here. Um, you know, they go to Kitty's Carnival, they put on their costumes, they jump, they listen to soca, they vibe out, they have a good time.
Mm,
They understand it's about freedom and it's about expression. And I haven't gotten into the details of,
mm,
the history behind Kitty's with them fully. But they do understand that it comes from a place of resistance and a place of, breaking barriers and being your true authentic self. And then at the same time, a couple weeks later, we'll go to the
mm,
Iranian festival Tirgan, because we're like, we
mm,
want them to see both sides of things. We want to try to, get them into both cultures. It was a little bit easier
mhm,
with the Soca Caribbean culture just because of the language. Like it's the same,
mm.
it's English all the way through. And that was one thing that we really struggled with is, them wanting them to learn Farsi. And so all three are in Farsi classes.
Oh,
Saturday
amazing.
morning, 9:30 to 12, they're up and
Oh my
out
gosh,
learning
you sound just
Farsi.
like my sister.
Yeah, but like this is
Except
what
for
we
them,
do,
it's
right?
Portuguese.
Yeah, this is the intention. This is the like we don't want the language to be lost because we are multiracial and we speak English. We don't want them to
Mhm,
lose that. We want them to be able to communicate with elders or other people that, when someone says, "Oh, where are you from?" and they're like, "Oh, well, my mom is Trini, my dad's Persian. Can you speak Farsi?" No. And feeling that thing
mm,
inside, we were like, if for any reason someone doesn't have access to language for their kids, that's okay too. But because we are able to, like, we're privileged to be able to put them in these classes, we want them to be able to continue in that way. And I think,
mhm,
those are some of the things that we really made sure that we did. Music is always playing in our house, and it's
mhm.
a revolving door. Like my kids will sing you the lyrics to Biggie, no problem. They got it on lock. Like you'll just walk around, Biggie, 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 fancy.
Yeah.
Like they just, and then they'll also sing you Arash, and they'll also sing you Destra and Masha. Like these are
Mhm,
all the things that we're doing with intention to like. You're not just gonna listen to Coco Melon songs on repeat. It's
mhm.
not Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. We want you to get all different
Yeah.
kinds of music, and same with food. They're trying different things, like all these different things come into play. And I think
Mm,
like the lesson that I sort of learned, a friend shared this with me and I've shared it with my friends as well, is that like I'm trying very hard to not tell them you're half Trini, half Persian. I'm telling them
interesting. How
you are a
come?
whole person. I dropped the phrase half and half,
I see.
because so many people that I know that are multiracial that are like my age were like, that was something I struggled with, this feeling like I'm half this, I'm half that. I'm not quite this, I'm not quite that. And they
Uh-huh.
said language, as we know, language is so important in these kind of situations where you're trying to get them to feel whole. You're trying to get them to feel like, you're an individual, you're unique. And just this idea of half and half, it felt like me, like I was trying to split them down the middle. But I'm like,
Mhm.
no, you're just a whole person. You are Trini and Persian, period.
Mhm.
And so I dropped that. Aria dropped it too. Mina's still kind of like figuring out how her words are going to be because she hasn't really had to introduce herself as much. But
Mhm.
Ari goes to summer camps and so on, and people are always like, oh, what's your background? And she's like, I am Persian and Trini, period. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
you are, right? Like,
Yeah. I
yeah.
see. Well, that's an interesting way of looking at
Mhm.
it. I mean, dropping the half. Would that? Do you think that that comes from like if you would you? Where does that come from in you? Like, is this connected to your work that in DEI then? Because I know that's why I'm like, you have to have done this with
Yeah,
intention. I wouldn't, like, how could you not, right? Like, when you think
I've
about
done
this stuff every day, and that's why I always have so many questions. And even like when you say, oh, having access to the language is a big way to connect with your own heritage and whatnot. I eventually, this is like learning for me because I eventually will have that with Hamza. It will be easier for our kids to understand East Coast Celtic heritage
it.
in English
Yeah.
than it would be. I mean, they will have a sort of Indian culture around, but to be able to connect with their grandparents in Hindi would have to be done with intention on our part, right? So
For
that's
sure.
pretty inspiring.
For sure. And it totally is connected to my work because I'm working on a few projects right now without getting to the boring details of work. Um,
No, please get
I
it. These are not boring details. For
for
you
me
know
they
what?
are
Just
because it's
tell
more
everybody because I
okay.
know you gave like the career, but tell them like what you're actually working on today.
Sure. Okay, so we will get into this. So, at Seneca, I am the manager for reconciliation and student inclusion. And so, what that kind of sums up to is I talk to students, I talk to employees, I engage with them in training opportunities, or attend events and programming to put a student equity lens on whatever is happening at the institution. So, be it that someone's creating, like for example, a couple weeks into my role, the athletics department was looking at creating women's only gym time, and they had some questions about um, what would the wording for that be, or how did they do that in an intentional
Mhm.
way, making sure that it comes off as inclusive to all who identify as a woman.
Mhm.
And those are the things that they would tap on me to
Mhm.
kind of give that wording for. Or we're doing policy reviews right now of different policies at the institution, and we are, my lens is, okay, have we talked to students
Mhm.
about this? Do we understand what a student experiences with appeals before we go make a policy on appeals? And yes, we do, and we're always including students, but it's that extra person just being like, oh, you're running an event during Ramadan. Get it that you need to, like, that's the timing that you
Mhm.
need to run the event. Have you thought about having
Mhm.
takeout containers for anyone that's fasting so they can take the food at the event and break
Mhm.
fast later on with it? Little things like that. Little, I call them like sprinkling the equity and inclusion dust. So just like, have you thought
Yeah.
about this? And so that's what my role is really about. And so, connecting that to raising kids, it's the have you thought about when my children have to fill out a form that has all these check boxes of what's your identity, and they don't find the Trini Persian identity.
Mhm.
Like that was me, right? Like I
Mhm.
identify as Indo-Caribbean, and I often would see South Asian or Black. And I was like, neither of those feel right to me. Neither of those feel like what I would identify myself as. I am South Asian diaspora as an Indo-Caribbean Trinidadian, but it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like I wanted to check that. And the Caribbean is often associated with, Black, Afro-Caribbean people, but that wasn't me. That's not what I felt like. And so I was always this like other, or like if I could at least have the opportunity to write in, I would write in Indo-Caribbean. And
Mhm.
I felt, I hated that. I felt really like it just kind of took a toll on me. And so when I'm thinking about like how to make my children proud of who they are,
Mhm.
things like dropping the half and half, or things that like being confident in saying I am this and this, or like
Mhm.
making your own box and writing in your own Trini Persian,
Mhm.
things like that is how I want them to, is what I want them to feel confident doing. And I think it starts from now, right? It starts from that little 10-year-old being able to introduce herself in that way, to later on when she's filling out her own forms to feel comfortable writing in what she wants to identify as in terms of
Mhm.
her ethnicity.
Mhm. There, every time you talk, you are kind of referencing this lens that you have built over
Yeah.
time. And it's like, even thinking about this event and what would it be like for Muslim students during Ramadan to belong at this event. This is a lens that unfortunately does take a long time to build. So, but you all are also in a dual identity as an educator, and you actually know how to teach. And so for people who are just starting their DEI journey, because I happen to know there are some listeners who do not have this lens. And where should they start? First off, let's pretend that we've gotten over the guilt of not knowing it yet. And deciding that, if the best day was yesterday, the next best day is today, to understand what we were really talking about here. Where should they start if they're just starting a DEI journey?
Start with yourself. I know that sounds totally cliche, but I think that like you can't, or it's hard to, anyone can do anything, but it's hard to imagine for me taking on this work if I didn't know who I was to begin with, if I didn't understand my own identity, my social location, who I am, what social groups I belong to, and what weight they do or do not carry. I think you need to understand your own privilege, your own disadvantages. You need to understand the realms in which where you have that privilege and that power and where you don't. And I think, when you think about starting to learn about equity and inclusion or getting into this type of work, when you are confident in who you are and what you can risk, then you can really truly dive into the work. I think that like there's so many people that kind of approach equity work on a very superficial level. That's just like check boxes and like, did I read the land acknowledgement? Great. But do you understand reconciliation, right? Do you understand what it means to be a settler on this land? Do you understand what the history of Canada, of Turtle Island is and your part in it? Do you get that? And how do you work through that? Or are you just checkboxing that you did a land acknowledgement at the start of your event? I think there's so many interconnected parts of this work that for you to do it authentically with your whole heart in, you have to truly believe in equity and inclusion. You have to believe that people are starting from different points, that have disadvantages, that we are not all starting at the same line, and that there are things that, because of someone's identity, that they are back a couple of notches. And then you have to really and truly want to give up some of your power and privilege to bring them forward with you. And like giving up doesn't necessarily mean like you're going to lose it. It's that you're giving up the space that you take up. You're giving up some of that powerful space that you take up to make space for other people from disadvantaged and equity deserving groups to be there with you. It's that allyship and that advocacy that, people from equity deserving groups need to be at that same starting point with you. And I think, when starting equity work, it's about understanding all of that. I always say start with the terms, like just start with understanding what things like equity, inclusion, power, privilege truly mean, and not the like textbook terms, but the like true EDI terms through people with lived experience, sharing them in podcasts and in videos and, in true authentic ways where people are talking like this about like, this is what it means to me. What does it mean to you? Think about this aspect of this conversation and reflect on it and be like, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Figure that out, right? And disagreement is okay. If you're just like, Akeisha, I totally don't think that, EDI work needs somebody to give up power. Cool. Why? Let's talk about that, because I think that when you're entering DEI work, you should be able to be willing to risk some of your privilege to do this work with others and beside others, but maybe others don't.
Yeah, well, I think even this level of conversation is interesting because I think there's even a lot of folks in my life that when they hear DEI, it's almost become like this fire term, like 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 run away, or it just seems really to be under fire, like especially in places like where I am in the US.
Yes.
So why do you think this is? Because the way you describe it, if I was to ask, even if they have never confronted their own privilege in their life, I'm fairly certain that members of my family would, if I was like, oh, like when I went to school, would you have wished that I had access to resources like like we've already talked about, first generation, and they probably would say, well, yeah, that would be great. So when you explain it like that, they would get it. Why is everybody running away from the term DEI?
Fear.
Yeah, so
I think like that's, I think fear. I think, that power that I talked about just now, I think it's the fear of losing that power when you
Mhm.
create space for others. I think a lot of people feel like there's only this much power and there's only this much resources. And so for other people to get, I have to lose, which
Mhm.
isn't the case, right? I think
Mhm.
when things like governments and people and institutions and corporations hold power as such a commodity, even the thought of like equity of like everybody deserves opportunities is terrifying,
Mhm.
and it's threatening, and yeah, it's totally not something people are willing to embrace when it might challenge them. And I think that's why it's under fire a lot. And I think that it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know. And when people don't understand this work,
Mhm.
they just don't want to have anything to do with it. I think the other thing is like, you know there's so many negative influences to EDI concepts in terms of people feeling like, okay, I'm not allowed to say this anymore, or being politically correct all the time is like not fun. It's boring. It's you can't tell that joke anymore, or you can't, make that comment anymore. I heard somebody say like, okay, like when you're thinking of, something you want to say, you have to think 10 times over, is this going to hurt anybody? And like, oh, how silly is that
Mhm.
that I have to think about all these people's feelings? I'm just trying to make a joke. But the other side of it is, if you don't, you might be severely hurting somebody. It might be that
Mhm.
microaggression that sends somebody over a little bit. And if you don't know what a microaggression is, it's those like subtle things that people say that are like,
Yeah.
oh, you speak English really well, for someone who is white presenting and doesn't look like they should be speaking English. Or like, oh,
Mhm.
you're really cool for, brown girl. Like, I would assume that brown
Mhm.
girls will be like so quiet and like barely say any words, and you're so extroverted and cool. And I'm like, that's a compliment. Let's talk about that, right? And those are what microaggressions are.
Okay, we are back. We had a little bit of a internet technical error there, but Akeisha, the last thing that you were saying was about microaggressions and how um, when when people have to do this work, it can sometimes feel like they are losing something in the DEI world. And that this is why there might be something, or the reason why people might be against DEI right now. And you're also saying it's kind of like when you have that microaggression that can send you over the edge.
Yeah, and I think, when people are thinking about this type of work and that fear comes up of uh, losing, it's that thing that makes people just kind of be like, maybe it's better if I just, keep myself and my bubble safe and just kind of like head down, do my own thing. But
Huh.
when you think about what are we here for? Like, why not extend that out? Why not build communities and relationships and friendships, and why not make the world a more inclusive and open place for all that we can? And why not give up a little bit for the better of all? And
Mhm.
that's where my EDI work comes from, is that
Mhm.
feeling of just wanting to, like, if I could do one or two little things to just, make the world a little bit better than when I got here, why not? And whatever power I've had to give up along the way, I did with a whole heart, and it hasn't altered my whole life.
Mhm.
And nothing bad has come from it.
Well, when you say this stuff, this is to me what sounds like the quote, like the work, quote
Yeah.
unquote. Because yeah, you know what? Changing communication patterns that you've had your whole life might take some work. It
Mhm.
might take some work to reconsider the things that come out of your mouth as they come out of your mouth. But you know what also takes work? It takes work to go through life considering if you're actually being insulted or not every day in a microaggression. That also takes work.
Yeah, and like I think most people know language is so powerful, like verbal and
Mhm.
nonverbal. But people often are like, oh, it's just like, not a big deal. So what? I just kind of said that, and maybe not thinking about the like long term impact of it. Like, I found when I first got into equity and inclusion work, the very, very first thing, and what I found was the easiest way to start, embodying a lot of those equity principles, is my language. And I started to like drop things
Mhm.
like, hey guys, when I go into a
Mhm.
room. It's, hey y'all, hey everyone, hey folks, hey peeps. Like, there's so many alternatives that are just comes as naturally and sounds just as great, but it's that feeling of like,
Mhm.
hey guys, assuming the dominant of, male in the room, and that all people are just, um, when you say hey guys, it doesn't feel nice to somebody that's like, "I'm not a guy, like, I don't like being called a guy, I'm not that's
Mhm.
not how I wanna, be
Mhm.
addressed," and you just a more, non-gender term, why not? And it's one
Mhm.
little thing, but it makes such a huge difference for somebody that's feeling whatever they're feeling about either their gender identity or just who they are, and, like, language is so powerful, and I
Mhm.
think that, if you're just starting your EDI journey and looking for something to start with, I
Mhm.
find that's often where most people feel most comfortable starting is just taking a look at, are you saying things that are ableist? Like when you're about to, ask people to rise for a national anthem, the quick addition of rise if you're
Mhm.
able.
Mm.
Wow, what a nice difference, or please stand if
And they
you're
wouldn't
able
even
to.
notice, right? If
Most
you're
people won't
able, you
even
don't even
notice.
notice, right?
And that's the thing with these isms is that if it's not part of who you are, you don't actually realize it's so unconscious.
Mm.
But for the people that it mattered that they can't rise for an anthem, you just included them in one
Mhm.
extra or like two extra words, right?
Yeah, which is just better communication, really.
Exactly.
Like if I was teaching communication, even unrelated to this realm at all, I would be saying like you would want to be communicating in a way that the most amount of people can understand the message and the sentiment. That would
Mhm.
just be better communication. Although guys is the one that is for me, like I would like to start a petition to make guys a gender neutral term.
And I think
Because
and I get it, and I think it can like if you did that petition, guaranteed it would go through and it would happen because you put your mind
thanks.
to it. But I think like for people that take it as a truly like, well, why is guys the term that we're
No,
using?
I totally
Like, as
understand.
you
That one
unpack
gets me
it
all
and
the
then, like
time.
yeah, and as you unpack it, you realize that there's so many layers to it. For most people, it's just another way of, "Hey, peeps. Hey, everyone." But for some others, it has stuff
Mhm.
connected to it that, turns people off from wanting to communicate with you.
Mhm.
So why not? Why not just switch
Yeah.
it to something else?
I think, speaking of language, I think part of it is like when we're talking about why is DEI under fire, like that phrase, that language almost needs a bit of a rebrand or something
Mhm.
because it's getting in the way now of the message, which when you say it, I think everybody's on board. Oh, hey, did you know you could be a just good communication, like it's just treating people well, it's just being kind and putting that out in the world. Everyone's like, yeah, we should teach that. It's like maybe we need a rebrand? Maybe at this point.
And I think yeah, I think this is something that I've heard a couple of times of just like, EDI under fire is a time to do that. Okay, what are we actually trying to get people to, click into and pay attention to? And because EDI is, so under fire right now in the US and here in Canada, it's I don't know if like a full out rebrand, but definitely clearing up some misconceptions of just like, what
Hmm.
is this all about? Is it about policing people's language? No, it's about language that might hurt somebody. Just, hey, why not remove it from
Mm,
your, your
mm,
everyday talk? Like,
yeah.
I think that's the two ways of looking at it. It's not about policing people's language or telling people you can't say this or you shouldn't do this or you can't, you shouldn't do say that or anything like that. It's more just like, what does that lead to and why
Mm,
not make it
yeah.
easier for some people that it hurts?
I kind of go to, why do you want to?
Yeah.
What's up? Why do you want to?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
And some of the work that I do
probably
where I
fear,
teach
probably, always comes down to fear, doesn't it?
And in some of the work that I do where I teach people how to respond to those kind of remarks, I always like we talked about UFC. I'm a UFC fan here. I always talk about the like the 1-2 or the little jabs that you can do back to
Mm,
somebody that's
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
coming from a place of like wanting to course correct them, but it's leaving something unchecked will cause harm, just like in fighting. Check those
mm,
kicks. But like, when you just let somebody kind of say something that you know is not cool, is hurtful, and they aren't sort of checked on it, they'll go and repeat it again and cause more harm. But if you just do a quick like, hey, why'd you say that? It causes
mm-hmm,
them for a minute to just stop and think, or like, that wasn't cool. You don't even have to like question them maybe if you're not comfortable, but even as just like, that wasn't cool, or like, didn't really like that joke. No big deal. You don't have to have like an hour conversation debriefing it, but that even
mm-hmm,
that not cool will get them to be like, ooh, that wasn't cool. Or like
mm,
that person that wasn't feeling that. I wonder why. And some reflection might happen. And you might think twice about next time saying something harmful, and it's again, the other big thing about like this kind of work is not everyone is comfortable calling people in or like saying let's
Yeah.
think that something wasn't right or didn't feel right or it
Yeah, well,
wasn't
it's
equal.
puts you at risk too, right?
Especially with your friend or like a family member or something. So the quick little jabs are I find the easiest way to me to maybe cause someone to rethink what joke they're saying or that term that they use or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, on all of these notes, I put together a thought experiment for you that combines this and combines what we were talking about with motherhood into what I consider one of those everyday scenarios that people have to deal with. And so, a thought experiment is when we kind of explore a hypothetical situation related to the episode's topics. And so it allows us to kind of take these ideas and go in different directions and all these sorts of things. And I called yours an inclusive kid's birthday because this is something that you are very used to doing. And so I thought, okay, imagine you're throwing a birthday party for your 8-year-old child in diverse Toronto. And in planning this party, you want to ensure that every aspect of the event is inclusive and welcoming to all the kids and their families. So, as an expert, someone who has these glasses and this lens, what would be some of the things that you would think about that probably weren't even part of the conversation 30 years ago? This could be any element like invitations, decorations, location, theme, food, you name it. What is going through your mind in an everyday situation like this?
Everything. Everything you just said. Let's start like I think let's start at the very beginning. So I think, when I'm thinking or like obviously I planned a couple of birthday parties for these lovely kiddos. But when, we're getting to that phase of like, okay, it's a couple months from your birthday. What do you want to do? It already starts like all of these innate things about inclusion start popping in my head. So I often am just like, do you want to invite all the children or do you want to just pick a few that are your close friends? And how are you going to, when you hand those invitations, how are you going to deal with the friend or the friend that isn't maybe part of your close little circle that's like, oh, am I getting invited too? And you have to say that no. How,
Mm,
starting from that point, I think is where we can have this thought experiment go into how can you be inclusive. So what
okay,
I've
so
sort of
you start
shared,
with the people.
I start with the people. I just start with
That
like,
makes
who do you
sense. Yeah.
want? Make your list. And then if there's somebody that I've heard one of my kids talk about that they aren't putting on their list, I'm like, oh, is there a reason why? Or like, what's going on in that friendship or something like that. And part of me is also just curious. So just like, kid dynamics nowadays, what's that like?
Mhm,
But I start from there because I want them to be prepared if they aren't inviting like everybody, which in our home we can't do. Um, well, what happens to that friend that doesn't get the invitation and how might they feel? And so I've helped them to develop some language around that where I'm like, okay, Ari, just let them know that like my mom said I could only invite 5 of my
mhm,
friends and I went with the people that I spend the most time with or the
mhm,
people that, when I look back at my photos or something like that, the people that I want to kind of see in my celebration. And it's a way of kind of being like, it's not that I don't like you, it's not that you're not my friend. I only have this many spots and I have chosen people that I either spend the most time with at recess or that, I really want to be there. And I often tell them that you could say like, but maybe we can plan another hangout or maybe we can
mhm.
do something else, later on in the week or something. And it's a way of just like, again, helping her friends
I
to
think
not
this is
think
an
it's
important distinction, actually, because I think a lot of people would think that inclusion is that everyone is invited. So, what's going through your mind when in teaching kids how to discern?
it's I mean, yeah. So inclusion, the way that you define there, like inclusion is everyone's invited. I feel like that's more equality,
Hmm.
that equity equality. I feel like
Hmm.
that's more equality of like you get an invitation, you get an invitation, you get an invitation. But I think the inclusion piece and like what true inclusion means to me is that like who will yeah, it comes back to her. Like, who would you want to see at that party? And who do you want to be there to
Hmm.
celebrate with you? What is the meaningful relationships and connections that you have with your friends that you want them at your party? And it starts from there for me of like, inclusive event planning, inclusive birthday parties is just like, it's all about my child and what they want for their birthday. I tried
Hmm.
to like step out and not do the whole like, oh, I think you should do this or I think you should do that. It's what do you want
Hmm.
for it and then how can
With
I help that
autonomy.
dream come true, right? Yeah, the autonomy of it and like how can I help that come true? Who do you want to see? There's the first step. And then we get into okay, like food and all that stuff. And right
Hmm.
away when I get those invitations out, I send out a like, do you have any allergies or is there anything that your child can't have? And I often try to like list out what I would be providing and being like, okay, I'm gonna have pepperoni, I'm gonna have I'm gonna have
Hmm.
cheese, I'm gonna have this. Can your child have something out of this that I put out there? Or what would they prefer to eat? Are they allowed to have sweets? Are they allowed to have treats? We're gonna have cupcakes. I'm also gonna have fruit. Like I try to do as much of that like bigger picture thinking of like, okay, some parents don't allow their kids to have sugar. Am I gonna have an alternative to cake that another kid can enjoy? So I'll have like some fruit cups or something, or just like little things like that, so they're not really feeling left out, but I'll make it open to all. I'm not gonna be like, "Here's your 1 fruit cup." I'll just have
Hmm.
a bunch of fruit cups for whoever wants it. So
Hmm.
it's like it's those little things that like, yeah, probably 30 years ago is just like you get a slice of pizza and you get a piece of cake and that's
Yeah,
it.
call it a
I don't care
day.
what your allergies are, what you're allowed to eat or not. And it just came from not really a place of, being mean or intentionally not inclusive. It just you didn't think about these things years ago.
Hmm.
And like those are the things I think about. I think about, for kid event planning, like we don't open presents with everyone. And my daughters often ask, especially my eldest one is often asked, like, can we just open my presents at my party? And I'm like, you don't know what people are able to give. One friend might
Hmm.
be able to buy you the newest, coolest, like best toy
Mm.
out there. And another friend may
Yeah.
not have that. And they
So
might make
true. It's
you
so awkward. Even as an
it's
adult, I'm like, why
so
are we doing this here? Like, this
so
is so,
awkward.
that's
And
like
like
a
a friend,
personal gift between these two people as from a
yeah.
joke from their childhood. Like, this is so weird.
Yeah. And then another friend feels really bad that they were only able to give you like a homemade card, and that's still so
Yeah.
sweet and meaningful. But in that moment, again, when you're thinking about inclusion,
Hmm.
how awkward is it for that other kid where you open the present and you're like, oh, thanks, you made me a pasta card, I love it. And then this other friend's
Hmm.
like, oh my god, you got me the toy that I've been wanting forever, you're the best. And like
Yeah,
that feeling, that can
totally.
hurt. So we just don't do that. There's a lot of these things that we're just like, no. And then like with music and the fun, like I always tell them, pick a couple of activities that you can do with your friends that that you'll enjoy. So if we have music, we make sure that there's always like a little area to set up with like crayons and coloring
Hmm.
stuff, or like puzzles and stuff for someone that isn't really into loud karaoke at a birthday party. And again, it's close proximity to both things, not like you're
Hmm.
all the way over there in this other room doing puzzles and everyone
Hmm.
else is here dancing. It's like right beside there, but it's a little bit off, so
Yeah.
you don't have to hear the noise. But it's just like thinking about the kid that isn't into loud karaoke and
Hmm.
dancing and all of that, because not everyone is, and that's cool. But there's this pressure, especially with social media, to know the newest TikTok dance or whatever. And like, what about the kid that isn't allowed to be on social media and has no idea what the dance is? And like,
Hmm.
how does that feel? So if you are, I tell her all the time, like, if you are doing something like that, spend 10 minutes teaching everyone the moves if they want to. Like
Hmm.
little
Oh,
things,
wow. That's
right? Like I'm
interesting. Yeah.
around and I don't just like I'm not just like, hey, come over in this party and then I disappear and I'm like having a glass of wine in the corner
Hmm.
there. I'm my glass is here and I'm watching and I'm
My
observing.
glass
I'm
is
like,
moving with me.
the glass is with
Okay.
me because it's a whole thing when you have a birthday party, especially at your home. But
Yeah.
I'm aware of it and I'm paying attention and I'm not the like hovering being like, oh, include that person, make that person come over. No, it's just the like I'm
Hmm.
observing, and then if I see something, I'll just be like, hey, Ari, can I grab you for a sec? Like no change
Hmm.
of tone, no nothing. Just like, all right, can I grab you for a sec? We gotta get something together. And then I'll be like, hey, your friend isn't like really looking like they're having too much fun. Do you want to just check in on them? And I'm not, again, I
Hmm.
make sure my words are clear. I'm not saying like, go make them join you. I'm just like, do you want
Hmm.
to check in and see if they're having fun, if they need anything? And she's
Hmm.
like, okay,
Yeah.
I'll go. Right. And I think, that's what an inclusive party looks like to me, that, there's multiple things or different personalities. There's food and snacks that everyone can
Yeah.
enjoy without feeling like, oh, I'm the kid that's not allowed to have sugar. You know,
Listen, I
there's
gotta
the
tell you,
P
this sounds
word.
like my kind of party. I
Oh,
know Hums and I'd be at this party. If I could go back and forth between like a 10-year-old teaching me how to dance and then coloring, I think I'd be like, woohoo.
And her friends always say that when they're like they don't want to leave these parties. There's some
Hmm.
parties you can pick up your kids and your kids like, I'm ready to go now. These
I
wonderful
bet you.
humans, they don't want to go. I often get like, can I just stay 1 hour more? I'll text my mom. Can you text my mom asking if I can stay longer? And I'm like, that's a good sign that they're having a
Yeah, I
good,
think
that
so.
they're feeling good about the party.
Well, when you
And
say all this, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, and it makes her feel good about
When-
throwing something like this to her friends, that they're
Mhm.
enjoying it truly.
Yeah. Well, when you say all of this, even though I called it like the inclusive DEI party or something, I'm actually just thinking it just sounds like good hosting. Like, even 30 years ago.
Yeah.
If even 30 years ago, if someone was coming to my house and I was throwing a party, I would be thinking, like, who did I invite? What are their interests? Why did I invite them?
Mhm.
What can they eat? Like it's my dinner party. Ooh, what music should I play? And even like checking in, like if it's my party and people are in my house, yeah, guess what? I'm kind of like taking a peek around. How's everyone doing? Making sure I speak to everyone, making sure that like I have a meaningful moment with everyone. Like
Mhm.
this to me literally just sounds like etiquette.
Yeah,
And Ari's lucky that you're actually showing her through who you're being because she's going to throw the best parties and all
the
and
best.
like her high school friends all throughout life people are going to be like, "You know what? Yeah, she's awesome. Like she always, she's just such a nice person, like good person." That's how they're going to describe people like that.
Yeah, and even, like, my middle one, Mina, now she's getting into, like, more friendships, and it's getting she's now getting to the level of, like, wanting to have friends come over for, like, little play dates and so on, and the same thing happens even just for a play date. It's just like, "Hey, what's your kid allowed? Do they have any allergies?" And one parent was like, "No one's ever asked." Like, "My kid's gone on a bunch of dates, and no one's ever asked that before." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, now you can ask it when you have people over." And
Yeah, do you
the
like
thing
me?
about this kind of work and, like, this way of thinking is, like, it catches on, and now
Mhm.
another parent sent out an invite a little while later, and she was like, "Any allergies?" And I was like, "We're making progress," right?
Yeah.
And she never did that before, and
Yeah.
it's
Also good hosting.
building inclusive.
I
Yeah,
would like
it's
my guests to not die
building
because they have an
inclusion.
allergy. Like
Exactly, and so much of, like, I've heard you say this a couple times now, like, so much of the things that I'm sharing right now, like, in this conversation,
yeah.
people are like, "It's just common sense." But you'd be amazed at how many people don't do it because it's
Mm.
common sense and people just overthink things, like, or underthink things. I don't know which way to put that, but they're just not
Mhm.
thinking about it, of a
Mhm.
thing that they need to do. They're just like, "No, of course, like, I'll have different foods." But even the different foods you have, if you haven't checked in, might
Mhm.
not be what the other person needs, right? It's
Mhm.
the golden rule of, like, treat others the way you wanna be treated? That's,
Mhm.
like, long gone. It's now treat others the way they wanna be treated, right? It's the platinum rule, and I
Mhm.
think that's what I think about when I'm thinking about events, be it my kid's birthday or an event I'm planning at
Mhm.
work. It's just like, what would that person want? And the best way to get that is from that
Mhm.
person. It's not
Yeah.
assuming, right? And I think that's a big part of equity work too. And equity and inclusion work is just like, you don't assume, you ask and you get
Mhm.
the right food, the right music, the right
Mhm.
whatever to help this person feel included.
Well, Akeisha, you are someone who is a lifelong learner and teacher, and clearly, just through your being, through who you are being, you're teaching others this sort of work. And one segment I want to bring in for you was called
Mhm.
baby thinking, which was something that we still feel like we are learning about.
Mhm.
So, what is something that you're kind of sitting on right now, something that you still feel like you have to learn or that you're learning about right now?
And this is like the thing that I think I'm actually struggling with because there's two thoughts in my mind. There's one of like, what do I want to learn about? Like, I think I shared at the beginning of like, I'm a lifelong learner and I'm just get bored when I'm out of school. And I think there's this part of me that wants to be like, I want to like learn more stuff, more theories, more ways of inclusion and all that. And I want to go this route of like maybe a PhD or an EdD or something like that. And now that's one sort of learning journey that I want to take on. But I think like thinking about the segment of, what am I interested in learning more about for my work and my practice right now and just human connection is I want to learn a little bit more about how to navigate adult relationships and adult conversations. And I want to learn more about how to connect through difference
Mhm.
and how to connect with people that think differently than me. And I think that's
Mhm.
something like, given the political climate and everything happening, and we talked about EDI work, DEI work being under fire. I think a lot of people's opinions are coming through on very, very specific topics related to inclusion and to equity. And I think oftentimes I'm in situations where, an acquaintance or, somebody that I think I know pretty well will say something and I'll be like, oh, I didn't know you felt that way about this
Mhm.
topic. And I have to
Mhm.
it sets me back. I like literally sometimes like step back. I'm like, oh, okay. And in my mind quickly, I'm just like, okay, this is a really good friend. How do I approach this topic? I have very
That's
strong
so
beliefs in
good.
this way, like it takes me a minute and I don't think I've perfected it yet of like, everyone tells me like my face tells the things I won't say with my mouth. I'm just like, I'm
Mm.
like, ooh, oh, I'm so
I think
uncomfortable
I'm the
right
same.
now. Okay, you totally just said something that was like really homophobic.
It's like,
Face palm. but I want to get better and I want to learn more about different perspectives from my own. I want to understand when people have very strong fundamental values and beliefs that are so different from mine and so disconnected from what I think is, um, what I think is the right thing to do or like my way of doing things. I want to get better at taking on their perspective to
Mm,
understand and yeah, to be able to still connect with them and have a meaningful conversation through differences, whether they be like political differences or like lifestyle differences or whatever. I just want to get better at that. And I think I'm on my way to doing it because what I've tried to do is really like when something like this comes up, I try to go and like research a little bit more about the
mhm,
alternative or like I tried to learn about okay, what would their perspective be or sorry, why is their perspective what it is and what led to that sort of thinking and was it
mhm,
their socialization, the home that they grew up in, was it their own work, their own life experiences, what has made them sort of like have these beliefs and then the way of them thinking and the way that they're feeling about it is probably just as strong as mine and the other side of things. So
yeah,
how do we avoid that big clash and just kind of be able to listen to each other a bit more? And it comes back to a couple of things that I've already talked about around like empathy and like just, you know, taking on someone else's perspective, putting yourself into what they might be thinking and feeling, and then asking.
mhm,
I don't like to walk away from it
mhm,
or like move away again, about to use ableist language. I don't want to move away from a conversation um with like icky feelings. So I want to just ask straight up like, "Oh, why do you think that way?" Or like and it's super awkward and it's might to some
mhm,
be confrontational, but I'm doing it from a place of like really wanting to connect and understand and I often say that like, "I don't agree with you. I really want to understand your perspective. So why do you think that way about this
mhm,
topic?" or something like that as a way to open up the conversation, even with differing points of views, and talk it through and kind of just, yeah, again, understand their perspective. And I think um, as I hone in on that skill a bit more and learn more about how to do that, I'm hoping that I can learn more about how to navigate differing opinions with adults. With students, I find it so much easier because like
yeah,
oftentimes they're a bit more willing to like listen and I'm willing to listen to them because I'm like it's just I don't know, maybe it's because of all my years working with students, it's just way more fluid of a conversation. But with adults I find it very and I mean like adults, my friend groups. Some of
yeah.
my
Well, that's
students
the
are
thing, right?
adults. So,
Students are already in a learning mindset. You
yeah.
already you're old, you're older, you're more experienced, but that would be a very interesting PhD, which is like how to do it when you're talking about someone you've known for 20 years.
Yeah,
Um,
and not wanting to lose a friendship or have a, a
mhm,
barrier in between a family member or something like that. So
mhm,
those are skills that I'm still working on. I'm still trying to figure out and learn more about. And I think it comes down to like I think I have pretty good communication, but I think there's more to learn about
mhm.
that. And it's the differing perspectives that I want to work on a bit more. That's
Wow.
why I'm a baby thinker.
Well, I love it. I think now, as we come to the close of this episode, I always close the episode with train of thought.
Mhm.
So, speaking of connecting to others' perspectives, train of thought is when we sum up a big idea from this episode and you have to connect it to a big idea from the
Mhm.
last episode and what that guest said. So, first off, what do you think would be one big idea from our conversation?
Ooh, one big idea from our conversation. I think there's so many, Bailey. Okay, I'll share. I'll try to get them into one thought, or maybe this is where your skills can come in and help me. But I think it's around like EDI work isn't scary. It can
Mhm,
be a part of your everyday life when you are able to incorporate things like inclusion and equity and respect and empathy into your everyday way of being. You
mhm,
are doing this work without knowing you are doing this work. You are making
mhm,
changes. You are teaching the next generation how to be kinder and just good people. And I think building it into your everyday, your parties, your conversations with family members, all of these different things is a natural way of doing equity and inclusion work. And that's what I would love to be the summary of this. Is just like it's in the little things that matter.
Yeah,
It's the little things that will set the path forward for the next group of people.
I like it. It's not EDI work doesn't have to be scary. It's in the everyday, easy ways that you interact with other people.
It's human connections. If you can
Yeah.
stay true to just making connections with humans and relationship building, good hosting, all of these things, then you're doing the work. You're doing it already in your everyday life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm gonna give you the top level from the last episode
Okay.
and how he summed it up, and you'll have your job is to think of how this pops into a connection in your
Okay.
mind. And so he said that his episode was about tapping into your identity and authentic leadership, holistic leadership.
Okay.
So yeah, so we have on our side EDI is not doesn't have to be hard. It can be through the everyday instances of how you're being with others. And how does this in your mind connect to tapping into your identity in authentic and holistic leadership?
Yep.
that one's
Like
that one's pretty
to
clear.
be a more perfect connection, I think, because I always tell people when you're starting with equity work, you have to know yourself first, right? You
Mhm,
have to be comfortable with who you are. And I think tapping into your own identity, understanding your own values and your beliefs, understanding where you are in your journey of life
mhm,
and where equity and inclusion falls into that journey is is how you can be authentic. It's how you can lead the way for the next generation. I think when you know yourself and you know the way that you want to be in this world, you know your own identity in terms of both like your social location and like your identity of your, those aspects of yourself, your race, your culture, your religion, all of those different aspects, but also know yourself in terms of your values and your beliefs and your morals and what you want to put out into the world, moving through life with that awareness, and then all of your interactions with people being that person, being your authentic self,
mhm,
is the way you're going to lead. It is that next step. It is, that each one teach one mentality of like replying back to a text of a person saying, um, you know, do you have it? Thanks for your kids accepting the invite. Do they have any allergies? And then that person being like, that's a good
mhm,
idea. Next time I send an invite, I'm going to do that. It's that, that
mhm.
teaching
Right.
the next person a little thing that they can add on. And it comes from me just wanting to, that's my belief, is that everyone should come to my party and not get sick or hurt or ill.
Yeah, good,
It's
good hosting.
those, yeah, it's those, yeah, right. It's those things that like are just very natural for you. And when you know yourself and you know what you want to put out there, bring it on to the next one.
Mhm,
Set that path for the next thing. And now I have a generation of kids that are going to have this sort of mindset and be thinking in this way already. And it's so beautiful to see that they're going to be able to tap into their identity and understand their values and their beliefs from a very young age. And
mhm,
I'm looking forward to seeing them get through their challenging teenage years with this awareness piece, because I didn't have it till like way later
mm,
in my university days. But now I'm raising these little kids that in elementary school, they're like, that's not cool. You shouldn't do that. Or girls can play soccer too. That's rude. And like, you're calling people in right away. And I'm like, this is great. They know themselves. They know who they are. They are aware of their
mhm,
identity. They're aware of their beliefs. They know they have their morals, their right from wrong, the things that they value. And they are the leaders. They are the
mhm,
next leaders. I see it in my kids. And I'm excited to see that grow for them. And I'm excited for people to listen to this and take a couple of ideas from it and be like,
mhm.
I never thought of that. I could do that too. And boom, here we are,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, perhaps it seems counterintuitive at first to somebody who has to watch their language on a day, but in the end, this does mean more freedom. It means actually freer kids that are able to decide without a question in their mind, do I want to play soccer today, with nothing else on top of that?
Boom.
And that's just a beautiful thing.
It sure is. It really is. And like, it feels all, I know people, I remember when I would first be, introduced to the world of EDI, as I call it. And people are like, why do you do this work? Like, it's such hard work. And I'm like, I just want to make the world a better place. And people like roll their eyes at me. But like, legit, this is why I think so many people get into this work, is that they've had tough journeys. They've gone through their own stuff. And they get into this work to
Mhm.
make small changes that lead to bigger impact. And
It
I
does.
think like it does, and people may not see it, you may not even be the one to see that flower bloom, but you've planted the seed and boom,
Mm.
it'll grow. It'll grow. You just have to have faith and believe that the things that you're doing right now when those EDI days are tough, you gotta just have faith that the things that you're putting out into the world will turn into something better. And that's kind of just how I've been doing it. And I see it, I see the students that come back to me and they're like, you started my EDI journey with this. Like I got a text over the weekend from a student that just presented her thesis in
Oh.
her master's. And she's like, I thought of you, and like right before I went in, I prayed and I thanked God for you coming into my life. And I'm not very religious,
Oh.
but I know what that means for someone who is. And she's like, I want to have a chat with you to just share my thesis with you. I haven't talked to her in like 4 years. And she's like, I
Mm.
just want to have a chat with you to share it with you and let you know the impact that, that one presentation you did and the couple conversations you did actually had on me. And she messaged me on LinkedIn over the weekend and I was
Oh,
like,
that's awesome.
yeah, let's do it. Let's chat. Like, I would love to hear how that seed that I planted, 4 years ago at
Yeah.
Ontario Tech, I think it was like my second year working there, how that's turned into your master's thesis and what
Mhm.
that's done for you. And I think that's the beauty of this work. And, that's where I'll leave this conversation now. It's just like, you don't know the impact you're going to have, but
Perfect.
trust that the things that you're doing, the way that you live your life and the things you're putting out into the world, it's connecting with someone somewhere.
Mm. Well, Akeisha, thank you very much for coming on. Let's think this through. I think you have given lots to think about. No pun intended.
Thank you for having me, Bailey. It's always nice to chat with you. And I am so excited to see how this all turns out.